Adventure, sports, outdoors. With host Harry Canterbury.
There I was, back in the wild again, and I felt right at home where I belong. I had that feeling coming over me again, just like it happened so many times before. Yeah.
Hi, Harry Canterbury with another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. Join us today as we explore radio in Peoria, Illinois. WMBD, the radio station we're going to talk about, went on air in 1927. Of course, entertainment back then is a lot different than it is today. We have all sorts of computers and televisions and movie theaters and all that stuff, but that was the number one form of entertainment during that time. We're also going to go to Jerry Scott's home in Pekin, Illinois, and take a good look at all of his antique radios. He has been collecting them since he was a young man. Jerry's an engineer, builds radios, and has been affiliated with the radio business all of his life. So join us today for a great show.
Adventure Sports Outdoors is brought to you in part by Corsall Lumber, manufacturers of quality hardwood products, buyers of standing timber in Smithfield. Central Pool Supply, everything from pools to pool tables and much more in Peoria on West Pioneer Parkway. Kelleher's Irish Pub and Eatery, located on Peoria's riverfront, open 11 a.m. daily. Eastport Marina, one of the only marinas in its class between Chicago and St. Louis, on Mariners Way in East Peoria. And by Goodwill of Central Illinois, free employment and veteran and youth services made possible because you donate. Our thanks to all of these sponsors.
Oh, how I wish I was in Peoria, tonight.
We're on Grandview Drive in Peoria, one of the prettiest places the city has. And I'm with, of course, my good friend Norm Kelly, the historian of Peoria. He's wrote many books.
Yes.
And knows an awful lot about this town. And the story is, oh, look at here, we got a turkey.
Oh,
look at here, we got a.
Can you see that?
There he is. Check him out.
Why is he by himself?
Well, there's another one right over here.
Man.
But there's turkeys all over here.
I don't suppose we should shoot one here.
We're out of season.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I couldn't hit it with a 38, could I?
But it's a beautiful drive through here. And there's a story about this road. Of course, this was made by drags. They had mules and they would drag behind them. First of all, they had to come here and cut the trees down.
Yeah.
They had to burn the stumps out. And after they did that, they had a mud road.
This road is 2.3 miles long.
2.3 from one end to the other.
2.3.
If you notice here, there's a lot of beautiful homes. They start right in here and they're just gorgeous.
All right.
And of course, Teddy Roosevelt in 1910 took a ride up here with a guy by the name of, you told me, Bartholomew.
Yeah, Bartholomew.
And he owned, you believe, a Glide dealership. He was riding in a Glide. This car is 20 years newer than the one that they drove in.
Man.
But it would have been the same deal, a convertible.
As they drove along, Bartholomew apologized for the rough road, and Teddy Roosevelt was said to have said, who knows, but Bartholomew, he said, what makes the difference? It's the world's most beautiful drive. That was an exact quote that was in the early papers. But it was 7 years old by then, so they'd made a tremendous amount of improvement, you know. And he was going to go to lunch up here at the country club.
Well, we'll drive up there.
Okay.
We're taking the exact same route that Teddy Roosevelt would have taken back in 1910.
That's right, you know.
We have a nice drive around here.
Yeah. I wonder if they had that way back in the old days, you know.
I'm sure they did, but
And they had carriages, you can imagine.
Carriages, yeah.
Horses.
it's a beautiful building.
Oh, yeah.
I've been in there many times. It's just
Oh,
gorgeous.
yeah. So they made it and had lunch, and of course Teddy would have given a speech of some kind, you know.
Well, tell us about Mr. Kaler. He lived here in Peoria.
Uh-huh.
Just give us a brief bio about what he did.
Enos is his first name. I don't know his middle name. And he lived up near Bradley at one time. And he didn't have a degree, but he worked at Bradley as selling crystal sets. He didn't sell them, but he put them together. A crystal set in those days. And I actually held one in my hand because my brother put one together. And he always apparently wanted to be able to be on the radio, and that's exactly what he decided. So he moved to Peoria Heights, and on Glen, did I say Glen?
Glen, yeah.
107 East, and built all the parts that go with transmitter, Harry, what else would they have?
Just whatever, transformer, transmitter. Well, I'm not a radio guy, but
Yeah, and he did it all in his basement and in his garage and in his living room. The station was actually in the living room itself. You know, the mic, I guess, or whatever you say. In 1927, he'd gotten it all together and already sent to the FCC application for his license. And he just sent it away like anybody else would do, and it was approved, which kind of surprised him. And one day, he said to his wife, if I get a letter from them, call me. And he'd be up at Bradley probably at that time, and call me and read it to me, because he said, I can hardly wait. And so I'm going to call her Hazel, I hope that's her name. And so she did get the letter, and she called it up, and when he answered, she said, hello, WMBD. And then he said, that's it, we got it. And that was how he got those call letters. He didn't think it of himself, believe me. He just didn't care. And the 1470, of course, comes along with that. What would those call, Harry? They're not the call letters.
that's the frequency.
The frequency would be 1470. And so now he's got everything he needs. And so then on February 14th, 1927, I might have that date right, 1927, he gets it all set up and he goes on the air. And when everything is working, he says, this is WMBD on the world's most beautiful drive in Peoria Heights. That's what he said. And they play music and they talk a little bit, and there's friends of his there. And then he gets the first sponsor. He gets his Lowensteins at an old furniture store. And from then, he kept the station then for 3 years, and he sold it to somebody for $110,000, and he went off to California.
And that was the end of him.
He had a lot of experience. He's an electrician, and managing that, putting together a radio station that ended up downtown in the Majestic Theater. A lot of old Peorians might have heard about Majestic Theater. And then they moved over to the one that you guys probably know, Harry. Remember?
Yeah, well,
and they had a marquee out there.
Yeah, downtown.
And we used to go downtown, and they had a boxing ring they put out in front of those, and we all went down there, and they broadcast the Bradley games, you know.
Hey, we had a great drive down Grandview Drive, the place where Teddy Roosevelt in 1910 took a ride in a Glide with Mr. Bartholomew, the owner of the Glide dealership here in the city of Peoria. There's a lot of dispute on how WMBD radio got its name. And while Teddy Roosevelt was in the car and Mr. Bartholomew was apologizing for the rough conditions on Grandview Drive. He says, it doesn't matter. This is the world's most beautiful drive. And talking to our good friend Norm Kelly, he kind of steered us right on exactly how WMBD came about. And it is a fluke that when he applied for his FCC license, it came back WMBD. And you've heard the story back and forth of how it got its name, but
Oh, yeah.
you know what? A lore is nice, and it's always, it's kind of fun to think that, you know, Teddy Roosevelt actually named the first radio station in the city of Peoria. We're out here at the Wheel of Times, and we're at the studio that they have set up. Jerry, tell us about how this all went about and what era would this be?
Well, it looks like to me this would probably represent a 1940s
Setup.
yeah. You can see a transcription there. It's a large, probably a 78 RPM, or it may be a 16 RPM. They made them in different flavors. But there's also a recording device back there, and those could actually be recorded in that studio.
So they would record them on a disc then?
Yes, that disc that the gentleman there is holding.
The guy with all the personality, right?
Yeah,
there.
yeah. That could that could be recorded and played back at a later time. So it looks like to me that's what they're getting ready to do. They're getting ready to do an interview.
To tape.
Yeah, an interview here, something of that nature.
And this could be Fibber, McGee, and Molly, which were Peoria personalities for about 20 years. And they were born and raised in Peoria and became nationally known. They had a comedy show. They had some hard times, but they had a lot of good times and eventually did pretty well. But they would tape the show live, and then it would be put on that disc, and at a later time they would air that.
Yes, there's also a playback machine right next to it, and perhaps they would record it on that recording machine, then play it back on the other machine there beside it.
Hi, I'm Dave Barth with your Sportsman's Tip of the Week. Many guys and gals are cowboys at heart, and everybody likes to shoot at a cowboy rifle. And today we have a few examples of some of those guns. We're going to start first with trapdoor Springfields. This is an officer's model, and it's a current production. Then we have the rifle version, and then we have the cavalry model, which is just identical just about to what Custer had at the Little Bighorn. They shoot a 45-70, they're single shot. You put that hammer on half cock, you open the loading gate, you drop your round in, close it, cock it fully, and you're ready to go. And then we jump up into lever action rifles, and these are Uberti, and they're exact copies of Winchester 73s. This is a saddle ring carbine. This is a deluxe rifle. And then Winchester started making them. They're made by Maruku, but they have the Winchester name, octagon barrel, and this is a full-size rifle. If you want something a little bigger, Winchester comes out with limited edition models. This is a Winchester 1886. Right behind that is the famous Yellow Boy carbine. It's a Winchester 66 copy. It's made by Uberti. This is a copy of a Winchester 92 carbine. It's made by Rossi. This particular rifle's in a 44 Magnum. If you're a big John Wayne fan, they make the John Wayne rifle. This is a 4440, the large loop, just like what he carried in most of his movies. And here's a nice example of some American-made rifles. These are made in New Jersey by the Henry Company. And if you want to do some long-range cowboy shooting, here's an example of a Sharps rifle. This is made by Shiloh Sharps. It's a 45-110. Probably the most common caliber in a Sharps these days is 45-70. And this particular rifle is a special order. It's got the shotgun butt plate, high-grade wood, factory-installed peep sight, and a extra heavy barrel. I'm Dave Barth with your Sportsman's Tip of the Week. Good shooting.
We're at a special place. Jerry Scott, a radio, let's just call him a radio nut. This guy knows more about radios than any man I ever met. He's an engineer. He's built radio stations, a number of them, and is an engineer for radio stations here in the Peoria area. But you know, there was a time when this all started. It didn't happen overnight. And Jerry, you want to give us a little explanation about how radio, you know, where it came about and how did we get where we are today?
Well, you can go back a long way, but in 1873, a fellow by the name of James Maxwell theorized that you could actually send electromagnetic energy through the air. Prior to that, it wasn't really thought about that much, but he thought this can be done. He didn't do it, but he thought and he theorized that it could be done and wrote a paper on it. Well, Heinrich Hertz picked up on that some 12 years later, in 1885 as a matter of fact, and he did it. He sent a signal from point A to point B, and then Marconi really led the way to more or less invent the radio. And this was in the early 1900s and a little bit beyond that. Then about 20 years later, it had advanced to the point where the first commercial radio station was licensed, and that station was KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Well, hey, we're going to look at some of Jerry's collection, and I have the utmost respect for this guy. I am not an engineer. I can barely tie my shoes, but Jerry, he builds these things. He tears them apart and he puts them back together. And if he doesn't have the part, he either makes the part or he searches the world to get it. And right behind us here, we have a radio we'd like to show you. And tell us about that radio.
This radio was built in 1924. It is an Atwater Kent, and it's a battery-operated set. Back in the very early days, many of the radios were operated by battery because a lot of people during this period didn't even have wired homes.
Jerry, this is a unique looking radio. It's much more modern than this one, of course. And what year would that radio have came about?
This would be an early 60s set. It's still tube type.
Right.
But it's high fidelity. It has 2 speakers in it. It was built by Zenith Corporation, Zenith Radio Corporation in Chicago. And it's just a nice, stylish, good-looking set that sounds great. It's a very nice sounding.
And there's a lot of people out there watching that may have had a radio just like that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure this will bring back some memories.
Memories
no
to a lot of
question
people.
about it. Well, this is an early transistor radio.
So this is one of the first transistors.
One of the earlier ones. The original transistor radio was made in Indianapolis. The company's name was Regency. And it was produced in 1954. It was comprised of 4 transistors, and it was marginally okay. It had to have a special battery to make it work. People bought it more as a novelty than anything else.
Well, we have a real special radio here that Jerry has spent hundreds of hours rebuilding. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of furniture I've ever seen in my life, and it appears to be hand carved. And tell us about that radio before we go over to it.
That radio was handed down through a family out of Brooklyn, New York. It was manufactured in 1937, and it was owned by a fellow that was a golfing buddy of Babe Ruth's. And he wanted the very best of everything. I mean, second rate was just not good enough for him, so he ordered. This radio was custom built. It had to be ordered. It's an E.H. Scott, and it's a Philharmonic. The radio has 30 tubes in it.
Wow.
Most radios of the day had anywhere from 5 to 12 was just about maxed out.
So this is the Steinway comparing pianos to radios. This is the high of the high.
Oh yeah. This is the Rolls Royce, no question about it.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at it.
All right.
Hey, you know, this is pretty cool. You got a record player, plays 78s, and you don't see many of those around anymore. We're on radio. Can we go off a radio to the record player?
Yeah, we sure can. We sure can. Crank it up just a little bit.
All right.
And this is an automatic changer. This was an option that you could have just a single play changer,
or you could
if you wanted to go top of the line, you get the automatic changer. And that's what this is.
Yeah. Look at that.
And bingo. As you can tell, the record is pretty worn.
Pretty well old. It's kind of wore out.
But the important thing is, I guess it still works.
Yeah, it really does. Hey, John boy, you gonna turn on the radio? This is the Walton, right?
That is the Walton.
That's the one that was on TV, and that's why it's worth so much money.
Yeah, that improved the value of it quite a bit,
Yeah.
being that it got that exposure on the TV show.
Well, it was on there all the time, especially when John Boy went off to World War II, and they were always listening there. What's going on in the. My mother told me that's what they did. We were always crowded around the TV.
Yeah.
Back then it was the radio, and that's a beautiful. And you were telling us that this piece of furniture, right here, it looked really bad, and you were just going to buy the guts and throw this out until you did. Found a little investigation. Some of them are going for $5,000, right?
Yeah, I saw it at a shop where a guy was selling some old radios, and I took a look at it, and it had no finish on it whatsoever. It was terribly discolored. There had been wasps' nest, mud daubers' nest inside it. It was just a mess. And I said, well, how much you want for this? Thinking that I was going to use the internal parts to build another radio or to rehab another radio. And the guy said, well, I'll take $8 for it. And I said, sold, Got it home, almost threw the cabinet away. And I got to looking on the internet, and I typed in Walton, and all of a sudden I'm seeing, man, these things are going for a lot more money than I thought they would.
So this went to the refinisher, didn't it?
Yeah, this went to a professional refinisher.
Yeah, he did just a gorgeous job.
Did a nice job, and
then you replaced the cloth because they all had cloth in the front.
Yeah, the cloth was all rotted away.
And what's that little? There's a little green light there. Now that's for fine tuning. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's some refer to that as bullseye tuning or fine tuning.
How that works?
Yeah, as you move past the station, as you can see.
Oh,
it opens up.
I see that, yeah, right.
And you want the greatest amount of dilation that you can get, and that means you're dead on that frequency. You're right there.
Wow. Yeah, he's got them everywhere. This is so cool. And I'll have to have Jerry tell you about what year these were made and who made them and what have you, because I haven't a clue. But what a neat, and I do know this. And when I was a kid, my grandma had one of these right here. And I think it was blue. They must have made them in different colors. It seemed my grandma had one like that in a different color, but very similar.
Harry, you're exactly right. They made those in a number of different colors, and they were fairly bright colors.
Hers was blue, kind of like ocean blue.
Yes. This kind of got the nickname a refrigerator radio because they almost always wound up
sitting on top of
somebody's refrigerator for
right.
whatever reason. I don't know, just a convenient place to put them.
Yeah. This is cool. Well, hey, I'm going to turn it over to him. You go through and explain, kind of give everybody an idea of what these are and what year, they were made.
This is a real nice example of this was actually termed a tombstone radio because its shape resembles a tombstone. So it kind of got the nickname tombstone. This is an AM and shortwave. It was produced, I would say, in the late 1930s, someplace around there. These are some early Zenith transistor radios, and they came in various colors, and they're good working sets as well. Then you have this was a radio that my father had in during his service in World War II. He took it overseas with him. He wound up in Greenland doing some work, and brought it home with him after that. So that's an Arvin radio, and Arvin was actually made in Indiana. That was an Indiana-made radio. This is an older cadet radio, late 30s. This is a Zenith, similar to the radio over there, the refrigerator top radio. This was made in the early 50s. This is a little more modern radio, as is this one. This is, I was telling you, the one that got all beat up and everything that one of my relatives gave me. This is an image. This is exactly what that radio was, except this is not all beat up. This is in halfway decent shape. Then we have some transistor radios here. This is an old alarm clock radio. and it was made by Crosley. And we have an Indiana-made Arvin here, and of course this beautiful Zenith radio that was built in Chicago.
This radio is old. In fact, Jerry, I think we found something in the house that's older than you and me.
Well, we had to, Harry, we had to search pretty hard to find that, but we managed to do it.
We did. What is this contraption?
This is an Atwater Kent radio. It was made in 1928. It is one of the earlier radios that you actually plugged into regular power. Like I said before that,
batteries. They
were all batteries, but this included a power supply, and you could plug it into regular house current, and it would work. And it's also it only has one dial, but it has 3 tuning sections in it, and they were strapped together with bands. So when you move this one dial, it moves all 3 of the tuning sections.
Was this volume here?
That was the volume control.
And that's it.
Well, you had an off and on switch. You want to see if this thing plays?
Yeah, let's see if it does.
Keep in mind this is original. It's a little fuzzy.
So it's got to warm up a little bit. Listen to that. 1928. Wow. Really not a bad sound.
Yeah, radio technology, I mean, as far as speaker technology, was not quite up to par yet. They made a lot of important advancements. The cone for this speaker, which resides, of course, down here, was actually made out of very, very thin wood.
I want to thank you for giving a tour of your home and all the radios that you have, and we did not see all of them. We just saw a lot of them. Well, a fascinating collection here at Jerry Scott's.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
The British were also busy raiding some of the cities of the Ruhr, but most of their attacks appear to have been directed at railroads and oil supplies for the German Air Force at various points in Belgium and Holland.
Services still? Nope.
Johnson Wax Program with Fibber McGee and Molly. The makers of Johnson's Wax and Johnson's Self-Polishing Glow Coat present Fibber McGee and Molly, written by Don Quinn with music by the Kingsmen and Billy Mills Orchestra.
Adventure Sports Outdoors is brought to you in part by Corsall Lumber, manufacturers of quality hardwood products, buyers of standing timber in Smithfield. Central Pool Supply, everything from pools to pool tables and much more in Peoria on West Pioneer Parkway. Kelleher's Irish Pub and Eatery, located on Peoria's riverfront, open 11 a.m. daily. Eastport Marina, one of the only marinas in its class between Chicago and St. Louis, on Mariners Way in East Peoria. And by Goodwill of Central Illinois, free employment and veteran and youth services made possible because you donate. Our thanks to all of these sponsors.
Thanks for watching another edition of Adventure Sports Outdoors. Radio started in Peoria in 1927 at WMBD, and it will be here for a long time. We have all sorts of other things that we can watch, television, computers, movie screens, and all sorts of things, but radio will be here till the end of time. Join us next month for another great show.
Oh, how I wish I was in Peoria, Peoria tonight. Oh, how I miss the goings in Peoria, Peoria tonight. Oh, you can pick up morning gloria right off the sidewalk of Peoria. Oh, how I wish I was in